So yeah, this political ascension from Mark Carney, from central banker to the liberal throne, is like the political event that makes you question really if we're all stuck in a simulation that's run by a particularly bored class of political junkies. Because just a few months ago, the Liberal Party was completely spiraling. They were buried beneath conservative poll numbers, a humiliating 20-point deficit. They were very much doomed to fade into electoral obscurity. But then in rides Mark Carney, fresh off his golden horse from central banker land, effortlessly scoops up the Liberal leadership in a landslide that felt very much predetermined from the second that Trudeau walked off the stage. It's bizarre but strangely fitting that Mark Carney, a guy who spent most of his life handling finance on a global stage and never had to kiss the babies or shake the hands with local voters, is suddenly now Canada's political savior and our next prime minister. At 59 years old, Mark Carney hasn't even sniffed electoral politics. Never. No town council, no provincial seats, nothing. He's practically a neophyte, but apparently Canadians are so exhausted by politics as usual that they're willing to gamble everything on the charisma of this financial wizard whose idea of connecting with regular voters is probably explaining bond yields to a crowd at Tim Hortons. The weirdest part about all of this is how quickly it flipped. I saw it for a very long time in like the wake of Trump winning. Just a few months ago, the Liberals were trailing badly against the Conservatives by a very laughable margin, with Poilievre smirking at the inevitability of his own impending rise to the prime ministership. But of course, Donald Trump gets involved again. Trump, unsatisfied with merely messing up his own country, he started eyeballing Canada, tossing out threats of tariffs and casually floating the idea of annexing parts of the Great Lakes. Predictably, Canada took it personally, and nationalism, which is not something that's like a political mainstay in Canada as far as what defines the parties, it became not just acceptable but outright popular. In a flash, Mark Carney went from who to Canada's only hope, riding a wave of patriotism that's usually only reserved for hockey games. And Mark Carney's economic street cred is basically his strongest weapon in this weird new political landscape. He might be new to politics, but people seem comforted by the idea that he understands money, especially as Trump keeps tweeting nonsense threats about annexing the Great Lakes or slapping tariffs on Canadian products or whatever other insane idea emerges from his late night rants. The polls show that the voters trusting Mark Carney's ability to handle Trump more than they trust Poilievre, which makes sense when your opponent looks like he would lose in a staring contest with his own reflection. But let's be real for a second. Carney's not exactly battle tested. 59 years old, he's stepping into the political octagon for the very first time, and running the Bank of Canada doesn't exactly prepare you for the circus of Canadian electoral politics. He might have kept global markets calm during Brexit or navigated London's financial sector during its various crises, but he's never been grilled by the opposition media about infrastructure or healthcare reform. His political resume could fit neatly on the back of a napkin, and no amount of international prestige is going to prepare you for the blood sport that Canadian politics inevitably can become. Public opinion swings, and it's been dizzying in this regard. We've seen a recent Ledger poll from early March that had the Conservatives somewhat ahead, and while other polls just days earlier had the Liberals in the lead. So trying to make sense of these types of polls is like trying to predict Canadian weather. It's pointless and likely to make you very disappointed. But what we do know is that Carney has significantly changed the math, and he's turned a previously predictable Conservative outright victory into what is now a very genuine contest. And electoral prospects now seem as volatile as cryptocurrency markets, which are wildly swinging from day to day. If you look at Ontario and Quebec, the eternal kingmakers of Canadian politics, they are warming up to Carney. The Liberals have clawed their way back. They've enjoyed a comfortable lead in both provinces, but obviously Alberta remains steadfast Conservative, which is not a shocker. The problem for the Conservatives and the problem for Pierre Poilievre is that his support might be rock solid in places like Calgary, but winning every single vote in one province is not going to help you if you get smoked everywhere else. And obviously, Carney is not walking into an easy situation by any means here. Voter fatigue is very real. Nearly a decade of Liberal governance has voters exhausted, very wary of more promises from the very same red brand that's dominated their screens since Obama's second term. Carney might represent a break from Trudeau's drama-laden era, but it's hard to shake off the stink of that political fatigue. Canadians might be ready for a change, but I don't think Carney's star power will be able to overcome basic human boredom. Then, obviously, there's climate policy, which is definitely Carney's Achilles heel. His ambitious approach to emissions and economic transformation, it obviously looks very good on paper to the global finance elites, but it's an easy target for Conservatives who are looking to scare suburban voters about lost jobs and higher taxes. He's walking a very dangerous tightrope. Pushed too far one way on climate action, and he's alienating his moderates. And if he pushes too little to younger voters, the people who matter, they're going to wonder what the point of anything that he stands for is. Despite these complexities and Carney's obvious vulnerabilities, the betting markets still place the Conservatives just a little bit higher than the Liberals right now. And there's some skepticism about whether Carney can translate his banking prowess into genuine voter enthusiasm. Obviously, sure, there's the nationalism aspect that has given the Liberals this shot that they have, but it could very much be fleeting. A lot of it depends on how angry Canadians stay. And in the instance of Trump, historically, it's not something that has been guaranteed to last. So the bottom line is that Carney's leadership has a ton of adrenaline ejected into it and into the Liberal Party, which was previously on life support. But his actual election chances still remain somewhat in the balance. He's transformed this race into a somewhat watchable, swinging momentum back and forth. And right now, I think it's swung heavily towards the Liberals. Yet I think that the outcome will still hinge on whether Canadians buy into Carney the statesman, Carney the economist, or simply tire of political experimentation altogether and decide that maybe it's time for a completely different flavor of what is generally a political disappointment. But if Carney is able to pull this off, it'll be a testament not just to his charisma or qualifications, but to Canadians' capacity basically to have sudden collective amnesia. If he fails, it'll be yet another reminder that running countries isn't as easy as running banks, and maybe, just maybe, a 59-year-old political rookie was a wild gamble all along. I don't think that's going to happen. I think that they're going to have some success one way or another defeating Poilievre, whether it just be holding him to a minority and forming coalition. Either way, I feel like whatever happens this election it's shaping up to be exactly the kind of chaotic spectacle that Canadian politics desperately needed to shake up the political landscape that has been in gridlock for many years now. Whether the voters actually want it or not is another story, but that's where we're at right now.